Hello everybody, my name is Kat and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things horror. And today we have to talk about The Strangers Chapter 1. I've been away doing some traveling, so I didn't get to see the film until last night. Also, I'm recovering from a slight cold, so if I sound stuffy, that is why. So, The Strangers Chapter 1. When the movie was over, I was walking out of the theater and the only thing that came to my mind was, this feels like a complete waste of resources. Now, I have not seen other people's reviews of this movie. I try to avoid seeing other reviews until I finish my video, just so that I don't get influenced by other people's opinions. But judging by the thumbnails that I've been seeing on YouTube, I feel like my reaction to this film is pretty similar to everyone else's. And honestly, this film is exactly what I thought it was going to be, which is dumb and underwhelming, and nowhere near the brilliance of the original film. This video will contain spoilers for both The Strangers Chapter 1 as well as the 2008 version, so if you have not seen either film and you don't want to be spoiled, click off now and go watch the original 2008 version because that is a legitimately great horror film. And honestly, if you've seen the trailers for The Strangers Chapter 1, then you've pretty much seen the whole movie already. So this is not a movie that I was looking forward to. I did become mildly interesting when I realized that Renny Harlin was directing it. Now, as far as his previous movies go, if you're thinking of something like Elm Street 4, yes, Elm Street 4, especially in comparison to its predecessor, Dream Warriors, is not the best film, although I also don't think it's the worst entry in the Elm Street franchise. I enjoy it for what it is, although I will also say that I definitely have nostalgia glasses on when thinking about Elm Street 4, just because it was one of the films that I grew up watching a lot. So yeah, not great, but also didn't hate it. I feel the same way about Die Hard Part 2, but I was really interested in seeing what he was going to be doing with The Strangers, just based off of his connection with the Elm Street franchise. And then I was also reading an interview with him where he was talking about how they filmed all three parts of this big Strangers saga back to back, right? So the idea is that we're getting part 1 now. I think we're getting part 2 in the fall, and then presumably we'll get part 3 at the beginning of 2025. I'm interested to see how they were going to handle it, because in the interview that I was reading, Harlan was talking a lot about this new way of creating film franchises. You film all of them back to back, and then you create a release schedule in which audiences can go see the next part within a mere matter of months, instead of doing what the standard model is, which is usually a film comes out, it's very successful, and then you have to wait maybe a year or two for the sequel to come out. So I guess the idea is that this is trying to introduce audiences to a new way of going to the theater to see movies, a tactic to still bring audiences to the theater and not have all the money go straight to streaming. Now, personally, I don't think that's the best way to be watching films or even making films, but reading the article and this whole experiment they were doing with film sequels, that also made me a lot more interested in seeing The Strangers Chapter 1 and just seeing how they were going to handle it. And yeah, just gauging from The Strangers Chapter 1, I don't think this experiment is going to be that successful. Here's the thing with wanting to create this one large saga that takes place over multiple films. You need a really good story structure, not just across the three films within a saga, but you also need like a strong narrative foundation in each of those individual films as well. So in other words, like each film in this three-part structure needs to be satisfying one of the tenets of the typical three-act storytelling structure, right? So it's like Act 1, Film 1 is usually the beginning, introducing characters, introducing the world. Part 2 is you have like that middle part with all the conflict, and then part 3 is the resolution. So you need like an intriguing beginning, middle, and end just across the whole saga in general. But then you also need to make sure that's present in the individual films as well. Like each individual film also needs to have its own strong beginning, middle, and end.
Did you just approach it as one big long movie or as 3 movies?
I approached it as one big movie.
It's not enough to say like, okay, here's chapter 1, here's like the setup and all of the characters, and then we'll just save all of the cool action stuff for chapter 2. Like, no, each film also needs to be its own interesting, contained story in order to really work. And when you don't have that, then the films just feel off, right? They're not an enjoyable viewing experience. Because what you have happening, which is what I felt while watching The Strangers Chapter 1, is you're just kind of sitting there seeing this very very bland story just kind of moseying along, and it just feels like the filmmakers are going through the motions and just doing a lot of like setup to get to the part that they actually want to get to, like all the meat of the story, like what they actually want to be talking about, what they actually want to be showing. And that's what it feels like is going on here. Like it feels like the filmmakers, like they might have an interesting idea for where they want to take this franchise, but for some reason they felt like they needed to do all of this like background work beforehand. And instead of coming up with an interesting backstory that, you know, takes place within this universe that we're already familiar with, maybe introducing a new element, introducing a new character, instead of doing that, they just go the very cheap route and just essentially remake beat for beat the original 2008 film. And the problem with that is that this film is nowhere near as good as the original film, so everything that you're watching just comes across as being really annoying. But it's really hard to remake something that already worked so well to begin with. And that's not just me saying that, like, the actors and filmmakers involved in The Strangers Chapter 1, if you watch interviews with them, they also say the same thing, that the original is perfect in the way that it is.
We were all such great fans of the original, and like, that's not something that needs to be remade. Like, it is perfect the way it is. That's not something that needs to be remade. It is perfect.
That's not something that needs to be remade.
So I don't know if this was a studio mandate or they were like, yes, we'll greenlight all these different sequels, but we're only going to do it if you remake the first film. I could see that being the case. There are three big problems with The Strangers Chapter 1, and that is the dumb characters, the poor story structure, and the lack of atmosphere. As I was saying, this is a film that offers nothing new to the Strangers universe. It really is just like a collection of greatest hits from the 2008 version, just redone in a very redundant and not scary way. I mentioned this when I first talked about the Strangers Chapter 1 trailer, and I said that it feels like it lacks a subtleness that the 2008 version had. And what I mean by that is that in the 2008 version, it is a slow burn at the beginning. It's really just introducing you to the characters and their strained relationship. And while this is going on, while they're awkwardly trying to figure out where to go next within their relationship, you have the strangers coming in, they're coming into the house, they're kind of stalking around. Maybe you'll see them appearing in the background while the characters are in the foreground, just kind of going about their business. And there's no like music cue, there's no stinger or jump scare. There's nothing to announce their presence. They just kind of silently stalk throughout this house. And that's what makes it so terrifying, is that they're just there, and it definitely adds to the vulnerability that you feel of these characters. And it feels very realistic, right? I mean, that is terrifying to think about, that you could just be at home one night going about your day-to-day routine, and there might be someone inside your house watching you do it, and you have no idea. That is a terrifying concept, and that's something that the first film understood and did so well, and it definitely created this atmosphere of dread throughout the movie. The problem here is that the strangers very clearly and very loudly announce themselves very early on in the film. For example, you have a whole sequence where the girlfriend character, I don't remember any of these characters' names. The girlfriend character, she is by herself in this Airbnb that the couple is staying in. Boyfriend goes out to grab some food, and so she's there by herself. And the strangers come, you know, they've already like knocked on the door a couple of times and did the whole "is Tamara here" thing. But then they come inside the house and it's like they're knocking things over, you hear glass crashing everywhere. There's one moment where you can very clearly hear one of them in the next room very loudly singing a lullaby. So they're making their presence very well known in terms of just making a lot of noise inside the house. And also the way that they're filmed like makes it so obvious as well. Whereas in the 2008 film, it was not afraid to keep them in the background for the first part, and again just kind of have them slinking in and out of rooms. But this one, like, they're always in the foreground of the frame. So it just doesn't have that like creepiness that the original had. There are some good shots in the film. There's like one shot in particular that I'm thinking of where she's at the piano just kind of playing and in her own little world, and the camera pulls back and we see like the baghead guy. We see his reflection in like this mirror that's above the piano. We see him like sitting behind her just staring at her. That was kind of creepy. I did like that, although again, even in that shot, like again in like the foreground of the frame, like right here, like where my hand is, like we see his face. We see his face, but then we also see his reflection in like the background mirror. And I feel like it would have been more effective if we had just like seen him in the background mirror. Like, yes, we know he's there. I don't need you to also show me that he's like right here as well. So the strangers in this movie have no problem with making a ton of noise and announcing themselves to the characters that they are inside the house. And our protagonists here are so dumb that even when they hear someone singing in the next room, like their only thoughts are like, okay, well, I guess I'll smoke some weed. I guess I'll play some records. Time to eat some burgers. Like, it's not natural reactions, and that's like the other big problem with this film, is that the protagonists do not feel real at all in the way that they are reacting to things. I mean, again, the strangers are like showing themselves practically in front of these people, being like, here we are, and they still somehow manage to like explain it away and just be like, oh, I was seeing things. Oh, I had some strong weed. That's all it was. I mean, I feel like you need something a little bit stronger than weed to be making conclusions that you were having a hallucination when a living, breathing human is standing right in front of you. So yes, the protagonists do not feel realistic. I found them very annoying. It wasn't like the couple in the 2008 film, right, where they're setting up a really interesting conflict between these two characters, right? One really wants marriage, the other doesn't. So you also have this like relationship arc that they go through in the 2008 film that ultimately ends very tragically for both of them. Whereas I feel like the protagonists in The Strangers Chapter 1, like, I don't know who these people are. I don't really know that much about their relationship, except that they've been together for 6 years. One of them's a vegetarian. They keep bringing that up. Like, they're just this kind of like standard annoying couple where they're just like, yeah, look at us, we're young and quirky, just annoying. And again, they're just so dumb and unrealistic. The scene after the boyfriend leaves, the girlfriend is inside the house and the strangers are around and they're making a bunch of noise, but she's choosing to not care about it. At one point, I guess the strangers get annoyed that she's like not reacting to them, so they just like shut off the power and everything like goes dark. And she's walking around the house and that's when she sees one of them for the first time. And then she screams and like goes and hides in the closet. Then they do that thing where she's in the closet and she's cowering and she's crying, and then you hear like footsteps coming up the stairs and like creaking, and it's all like very slow and like they're trying to do this big like build up, right? And they're trying to make you think that it might be the strangers, but you know, it's very clearly going to be the boyfriend that opens the door. And lo and behold, when the door opens, it's the boyfriend. And she goes, there's someone in the house. And then he goes, oh, and they shut off the lights? Like, okay, number one, why would that be your reaction to your girlfriend telling you that there was someone inside the house? Number two, why are you creeping around? Again, this is what I'm saying, where they feel like unrealistic characters. Because if I'm staying at an Airbnb and I go out and then I come back and my significant other is nowhere to be found and the lights are completely off, the first thing I'm going to do is say, hey, honey, I'm back. Why are the lights off? Or I'm going to be calling out to them and be like, where are you? What I am not going to do is take my phone and put on the flashlight and then just slowly go creeping through the house, opening doors until I find them. Like, I don't know anybody that would like do that unless you're a psychopath yourself. It's also annoying because you can tell that the only reason that they're doing it is so that they can try to have this like fake out scene where you think the strangers are coming in the closet, but oh nope, it's just the boyfriend. But just lazy storytelling. And then there's the whole sequence when they're like running in the woods behind the Airbnb, and they've somehow managed to find a shotgun very conveniently. And the boyfriend has it, and he has one of the strangers, I think it's like Baby Doll, or the girl with the Baby Doll like face mask. He has her at gunpoint, and it's like this whole long dragged out sequence where he's telling her like, drop your knife. You need to turn around slowly. Tell me where my girlfriend is. These characters know that if the strangers have their way, they are going to kill them. So this idiot has one of them in his crosshairs. He has the ability to take her out, and he doesn't. And then the baghead guy comes and like tackles him, and that's it. And I feel like them killing off one of the strangers would have actually been something different and would have actually been like a really good plot point to continue on into the second or third film. Because think about it, that's one, something that we haven't seen before. Maybe The Strangers Prey at Night, or whatever that film is called, did. I have to be honest, I have not seen the sequel to the 2008 version. So maybe they did kill off a stranger, and that one I don't know. And it would have also raised the stakes for The Strangers at the same time, right? Because now suddenly one of them has been taken out, and what are they going to do about that? And then you also have a reason for The Strangers to keep going after these characters, even after the events of this first film, right? Because now there's a motive. Now they wanted to get revenge. And that's what I feel like you need if you're going to create this saga that's going to last over 3 parts. If you're going to do something like this, then you really need to have your protagonists be on the same kind of level, at least intellectually, as your antagonists. That's what will keep the story interesting, right? It's kind of seeing this back and forth between these two formidable opponents. Whereas when you're having something here where it's like you have the antagonists that very clearly have an upper hand to the heroes because the protagonists are just so dumb. Like, it's not interesting. It's just boring. Essentially, like, the strangers capture them, they stab them, and then they go about, like, their merry way. And so it's like, well, what motive do they have to keep going after these characters after all of this? There's also something weird going on with the town in which the strangers are committing their killings. They get to this, like, small town, and, like, all the townspeople are looking at them, like, really weird. Like, all of them are giving them, like, side-eye. It's a very, like, a cliched horror thing where it's like, oh, small country town. And they don't like the city people that are coming in. Like, we've seen this a bunch of times already in horror films. They're doing, like, gardening work outside my window, so if you hear noises, that's what that is. I think, too, what this film was missing, that the 2008 did really well, but the reason that the 2008 version scared me so much when I saw it the first time, I saw the original film when I was, I don't want to say like little, I wasn't like a little kid, I was probably like a young teen when it came out. And I was at that age where my parents were starting to let me stay home alone for the first time. And whenever they would let me stay home alone, they would say, leave the lights on in the living room so that it looks like somebody is home. If you left your lights on and people thought that there was someone home, then that would deter any, you know, nefarious person from wanting to come into your house and try to rob you or try to like break in or something. They're only gonna want to break in if it looks like the house is dark and empty and abandoned. So for me, staying home alone, safety always meant turning the lights on, right? Making it seem like somebody is at home so that no one would bother me. And then in comes The Strangers in 2008 and completely shatters that worldview and does it with that like simple line at the very end. And she just asks them like, why are you doing this? And they simply say,
because you were home.
Again, my entire sense of safety shattered with that one line. And suddenly I became very terrified to stay home alone and leave the lights on. This film, they like try to recreate that moment, but...
Why are you doing this, Dad?
Because you're here.
It just doesn't feel that effective. Also, the ending to this film, like, again, they do the same thing where they stab the couple, but it doesn't feel as, like, violent as the 2008 version. Like, in terms of the blood and the gore, this feels very tame. There's not much of it. Is this movie rated R? I guess it is, but I don't really know, like, what for? I feel like there could have been an interesting story here. Like, I think you could make an interesting Strangers movie set in an Airbnb, but I just wish they had done something different. Like, again, it feels like they have an idea of how they want to expand this universe. I just wish they had, like, gone there, right? Give us something new. Put us, like, right in the middle of whatever it is that you want to do, however you want to expand this world, whatever new element you want to bring in. Just bring us into that, right? That's what I'm more interested in seeing. I don't need to see a poorly done rehash of the 2008 film. Also, can we talk about the very odd product placement in this movie? There is a scene at the beginning of the film when the two characters are driving and the girlfriend takes out her phone and there's just a close-up of her screen and it says like Ally Bank and she's like, oh, our Ally money came in. And then like that's it. Like they never bring it up again throughout the film. Again, it's just like this very weird like mini commercial that they're just like putting into the beginning of the movie for some reason. Like I've seen more seamless product endorsement in daytime soap operas. I mean, I guess Ally Bank is helping to fund this whole saga.
Ally, we're helping millions save more for the things that matter most to them.
If this is the future of mainstream filmmaking, we are all in a lot of trouble. So yeah, I don't really know what else to say about this movie. It just wasn't good. We'll see what they do with chapters 2 and 3, to be continued. In the meantime, let me know your thoughts on The Strangers Chapter 1. Did you hate it? Did you love it? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.
That's not something that needs to be remade. It is perfect the way it is.